Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar again. I'm Francis Seeley from GlobalNet 21 and a local group called Enfield Climate Action Forum. And we're going to look again at education and climate change. We've done a couple of webinars on it, but it is an important subject because young people are the future. They're going to face the climate change in a way we're not facing it at the moment. And there's a lot of concern and anxiety. So how do we approach climate change in education? We've got Jenny Chapman with us today, and she's going to tell us what she does. She's very much involved in this. So Jenny, thank you, for joining us today. And maybe you can begin by just telling us briefly a little bit about your background.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for having me. So I am a biologist by training. I studied biology for my undergraduate. I did a master's in taxonomy and biodiversity. So I've really come to all of this with just a love for nature. And I've been in teaching sort of on and off for about 7 years and teaching biology. And I used to teach a little bit of environmental science as well. And I've been running the London Schools Eco Network since September 2021, which I know we're going to speak about a little bit more.
And I mean, you say you're a biologist and you love nature and all that, but what made you want to be an activist in climate change and take it further than just a passive interest?
Absolutely, yeah. No, I definitely would call myself an activist, and that's thanks to the values that were instilled in me in childhood. I have parents who themselves have been involved in campaigning since the 70s. They brought me up with a love of nature. I spent a lot of time pottering around nature reserves as a child, and they made me aware of my impact. So this was a very normal thing for us to be talking about when I was younger. Obviously, that then led to me then studying biology and taking it further sort of academically. And as I was studying my undergraduate and my master's, I just feel like you can't not be interested in the climate crisis. It is everywhere. It's in my mind, the most important existential threat that we face. So I struggle with people who aren't interested in it because I just feel like it's so important to everyone on this planet.
Okay, so you've taken your interest in the schools, and I mean, there are two ways of looking at how you could do that. One is to see how green you can make your schools, and the other is to see how it can be treated and approached in the curriculum. I mean, do you address both of those issues?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think schools are really important places to address this, because in the same way that in schools we teach students what a healthy diet is, and we do that both through education in the classroom, but we also do it through food that we serve in the canteen. Schools are where students find often their role models. I think we're very well placed as large organisations, often with complex buildings and with teams. We can show them how these kind of organisations can be sustainable. We can show them what an effective recycling system looks like. We can show them what it means to choose to not fly. We can normalise these decisions. But that's one part of it. But as you say, additionally, we need to teach students these values and these skills in the same way that we would teach them maths or, for example, PSHE, personal, social and health education. So they need to know what is degrowth, what are green careers, what is a tipping point. So I think you're right that schools are really interestingly placed to sort of act as the role models for students in how they act as organisations, but also as sort of educational institutions in teaching students facts and values, yeah.
You say you have to teach them, but an interesting question is, do they teach you as well?
Absolutely, yeah. I learn a huge amount from young people, and they definitely bring a perspective on how it's just so interesting to hear how they're feeling. You mentioned at the beginning about how young people are the future, and there's a lot of concern from our young people, because if we look at some of the climate models, there are some estimates that suggest that we've got sort of 7 or so years to really bring about significant change. And if you look at a student who, for example, is in year 9 at the moment, I mean, in 7 or so years, they'll have perhaps be partway through their university career. You can't keep saying, and you often hear politicians say this, unfortunately. They say, oh, look at these young people, aren't they fantastic? And they are, they're incredible. And they kind of think, oh, well, we don't really need to worry about this. Look, the young people have sort of got it all under control. They're incredible. They're doing all this activism. And that puts a lot of pressure on young people, and also sort of unfairly takes the blame off those of us generations who've gotten them into this mess. So that's probably one of the main things that I think I've learned from young people, but also just the perspectives they bring, their sort of passion for inclusivity and diversity is fantastic to see. And yeah, just have great ideas.
Okay, but when you're active, I mean, you can't always do it on your own, though you are a force of nature, I can see. But you know, you need a sort of network to work and help you and sort of galvanize what you do. And you belong to the Eco School Network, don't you? Can you tell us what that is and what you do?
Yeah, so it's the London Schools Eco Network, LSEN. So this was a network set up in 2019 that was initially just a partnership between two schools. That then was so successful that it grew to sort of a handful of schools in London. We had a sort of teachers meeting with one another, people like myself and other schools who were interested in sustainability. And then we brought our students on board, and sort of the students were meeting as well. From there, it's just grown and grown. So today, the LSEN has got about 60 schools involved from across the capital, and the model of kind of having a sort of collaboration between students was so successful, and staff collaboration between students and staff. So it was so successful in London that Dr. Jess Tipton, who set up the LSEN in 2019, replicated that model around the UK. So we now have networks in Avon and Devon, and we have networks in Mersey and Surrey, all kind of modelled on the London Schools Eco Network. And that's led to them now being an umbrella of this kind of network of networks called the UK Schools Sustainability Network, the UKSSN. So it is so exciting to have this strength in numbers, and that's where I think the real value of these networks is.
So what does it actually do? I mean, do you sort of get together a network? Do you have training courses? Do you have conferences? How does it help you do what you do in your individual school?
Yeah, great question. So we find that schools often are all trying to do similar things. So just take, for example, a discussion that I've been having with schools a lot at the moment. Schools are very interested in food. The food that they serve, it's a very tricky topic, it's a very emotive topic. There's obvious kind of health questions there alongside the sustainability questions. And then, of course, safety and financial questions. Like it's a really big, messy topic. So lots of schools are looking to make their school menus more sustainable. And schools have done this in various different ways. So some schools have looked at introducing meat-free Mondays, which is a campaign you might be aware of. Other schools have ditched beef and lamb from their menus. So we've got this incredible range of schools in the network, all of whom have gone about this question in slightly different ways and have therefore gained a load of experience in what works and what doesn't. So the value of the networks is bringing together all of these people. And say we have a meeting that's just focused on food, which is what we did a few months ago. You've then got a huge range of people in the same space, all like-minded, all trying to pull together. And there's no competition between any of our members. We all want to help one another to be as sustainable as possible. It's such a collaborative atmosphere. So all of these people who are saying, okay, well, we really struggled to introduce Meat-Free Monday. We came up against these problems. And then you've got someone over here who's able to say, oh, well, look, this is what we tried. We did this campaign, or we wrote this kind of letter, or we sort of launched it in this way. So just by having this network, this community of people who have all tried to do the same thing, but in slightly different ways, there's a huge kind of collective knowledge that is extremely valuable.
But I mean, you talk about the Eco Schools Network, but you're also part of the UK Schools Sustainability Network, which is another network. I mean, how is that different from the Eco Network? I mean, what does that do?
Yeah, in a sense, it's kind of the same but bigger. So it has exactly sort of the same setup where students come together, and just to note also that the students lead our meetings. The meetings where we have students from, say, across London in the LSEN or across the UK in the UKSSN, these meetings are chaired by students. The students take the minutes, so we're really giving them the kind of life skills alongside this platform and this community of like-minded people. So yeah, within the UKSSN, we do similar things, just at much greater scale. So for example, we had students from across the UK, go up to Glasgow in November last year, and they attended COP, and they had an incredibly busy few days when they were meeting ministers and they were speaking on panels and they were running workshops. And yeah, it's this fact that we can get students from all across the country who all have these similar values, but all have these slightly different experiences. I think it's really powerful. We run lots of events, so often the events within the London Schools Eco Network, we open it up to people across the UK. So just as an example about food, we had a webinar recently we had 3 fantastic speakers, one of them talking about insect protein in school meals, which was fascinating. Somebody else talking about the extreme impact that removing beef from menus can have. And then the final speaker was from a school in Worthing where they had just gone completely vegan. It was incredible. So just hearing from these voices in these spaces is really valuable, because then what the students and the staff who attend, we see this incredible ripple effect. They go back into their schools, and I say to my students, you are influencers. You have a sphere of influence. Okay, you influence your teachers, you influence your peers, you influence your friends, you influence your family. So by having these kind of UK SSN and LSEN reps who attend our meetings, they can then go into their schools. Some of these, we're working with schools have sort of say 1,000 or 2,000 students, and with another kind of 500, 600 members of staff. So the ripple effect here is potentially enormous in terms of the numbers that we can reach.
And you're also associated in a way with Transform Our World, aren't you? I mean, you talk about networking the networks, and that's another sort of umbrella network as well, isn't it?
Yeah. So the UK SSN has become such a sort of incredibly successful organisation that Dr. Jess Tipton, who I mentioned earlier, established, that Transform Our World stepped in to host the network. So they are fantastic in providing us with kind of the support in terms of the infrastructure and a platform to do what we do. They're a really amazing organisation. They've got this incredible website. I suggest you check them out, transform-r-world.org. They've got some incredible campaigns. So, for example, next week, on the 16th of June is Clean Air Day. They've got incredible stuff of teaching resources on their website. So yeah, it's fantastic that we're working with them as well.
Okay, well, let's look at what you do and how you do it. I mean, are you trying to get schools to be carbon zero? And do you have a sort of step-by-step strategy about how you're going to achieve that?
Yeah, great question. Ultimately, yes, that's where we need to be. That's where all organisations need to be. It's a difficult pathway, and partly because schools are incredibly different from one another. So, for example, my school, I work at Highgate School, we've been thinking incredibly hard about how we get to net zero. We've got an enormous school site with lots of different types of buildings. That's going to be very different to a school that was maybe built in the last 10 years. So the pathway of how schools get from where they are to where they need to be is going to be incredibly different for different schools. However, what we can do as the networks is sort of offer ideas of what schools can do, and how and sort of campaigns they could run or changes that they could make. Something that's been really powerful recently is that in addition to bringing together students, bringing together staff, we've also started to bring together within these networks people involved in the operations side of things. So we've got an operations team where members of staff, for example, estates teams and bursars and teams involved in sort of procurement, they are now coming together to meet and to discuss ideas as well. So I think that's where we start to see the change, where we've got students involved and teachers involved, and then the sort of support staff involved. This has to come from all parts of the school. Schools are very big, messy, complex organisations with lots and lots of people. And this getting the whole community behind this sort of path to net zero is really important. Something I think that we might talk about a bit later is also the idea of parents being involved in the kind of wider school community, because I think that's really valuable. But just going back to your question about getting to net zero, I suggest if any schools are interested in this, they look at a campaign called Let's Go Zero, where schools can pledge to become net zero by 2030. And on their website, they've got lots of information about how schools can get there.
And how do you do that? Do you do that by suggesting you cut emissions or by offsetting? Because there's a huge debate about offsetting is an excuse for some people not to cut emissions.
Yeah, we absolutely must focus on cutting emissions. We cannot get to where we need to get just simply by offsetting. It's just not possible to, for example, plant the number of trees we need to continue doing what we're doing. And it's not just about carbon either. It's about natural resources and it's about biodiversity. You can't offset an extinction. So yeah, in my mind, offsetting is not the answer. It could be in some very specific circumstances, the least worst scenario. But I'm very much of the opinion that we must cut emissions before we even think about offsetting. This is, as I've said, for schools, very, very tricky. And for any organisation, for any individual, actually. I myself have just been doing some carbon literacy training with an organisation called Future We Want. And that was all based, I don't know if you're aware of the book, How Bad Are Bananas? Which is by Mike Berners-Lee, and it does a fantastic job of trying to quantify how different activities and different products kind of rank in terms of their carbon or CO2e sort of equivalent emissions. So yeah, we need people to be trained in carbon literacy. And that's a very specialist task, and that probably requires sort of, there's lots of consultancies that will work with schools to do this. So you need to quantify, because then you need to know where in the school are your greatest emissions. So are your school's emissions enormous because you keep flying to Canada for ski trips? Okay, easy, there we go, let's stop doing that. So yeah, it's about quantifying, reducing, and then if you've gotten to the point where you literally cannot reduce your emissions any further, then yes, maybe then look at offsetting.
By the way, you probably won't be able to fly to Canada ski very much in the future because the snow is going, so that will help. But tell me, do you get involved in other issues like air pollution outside of schools, for example, and get the school involved in that and the parents and develop campaigns?
Absolutely. Air pollution is, I mean, I'm terrified about the climate crisis, but that genuinely keeps me up at night is air pollution in London. And actually not just in London, in most cities in the UK and in Europe and actually around the world, it is shockingly bad. There's a fantastic campaign called Address Pollution. If you just find their website, perhaps we could put a link in the podcast. You can just type in your postcode and you can see which World Health Organization limits are being breached in your area. And it's absolutely terrifying how bad this air that we're all breathing every day. And the statistics are just terrifying about the number of lives lost, the quality of life that's affected, and particularly for young people. And I saw a fantastic campaign that was actually part of an air pollution campaign in Manchester, sort of showed a glass of dirty water and a glass of clean water. And it was saying, well, look, 150 years ago, Manchester got clean water. We wouldn't be drinking this dirty water anymore. So why are we still breathing dirty air? I think the fact that it's invisible is the concern here. So I am very interested in air pollution, and that's something that the London Schools Eco Network have done a lot about. And as I mentioned, Clean Air Day, which Transform Our World, this umbrella organisation, leads on, is coming up on the 16th of June. So a couple of examples of what we've done. Last term, a few months ago in the spring, I ran a workshop with Dyson, who do a lot of work about sort of indoor and outdoor air pollution. And the students came together from across London. They had a fantastic sort of workshop led by some Dyson engineers to try and design some solutions to sort of scrub the air of air pollution. But me personally, I think that we need to stop the pollution being released in the first place. And the vast majority of the pollution in London is from road vehicles, and then there's some issues with incineration. So what we've tried to do as the London Schools Eco Network is host campaigns in our individual schools where we ask parents to not drive to school, we ask staff to not drive to school, and we've done that by sort of handing out leaflets. But also you have to think about the positive side of this as well. So for example, in my school, we ran a campaign recently where students who cycled to school or scooted to school got rewarded with a lovely warm pastry. So it's about reinforcing positive behaviour and then gently trying to explain to those people who are part of the problem, why we want that behaviour to change. So next week on the 16th, I'm really excited that some of my students here have been involved in, actually along with Dyson, they have constructed these beautiful air pollution monitoring kits, and they've done all of the soldering, they've made it out of these components, and they've done all the programming. And you turn these kits on, and they've got two really clear lights, and you hold it up on a road and you can see the colour of the lights. It kind of goes red, amber, green, and you can in real time visualise the pollution. And I think the fact that we've got students involved and they've learned the skill, they've kind of learned the engineering skills, they've learned how this is coming together, they can then go onto the road, not onto the road, onto the pavement, obviously, and they can actually see in real time the impacts that our campaigns are having. So we're really hoping to see a difference between the kind of normal day of people driving to school, and then we're asking people to not drive to school on Clean Air Day. And yeah, it's exciting that our students have actually constructed something that can hopefully gather the data to show that hopefully, fingers crossed.
Okay, I mean, listening to you talk, it seems that a lot of your activities that you're talking about are ancillary activities, you know, campaigning, getting people to do this and that. But how do you sort of get it into the curriculum? I mean, you can do all these things and the curriculum doesn't address climate change. I mean, how do you do that? And are you able to do it?
Excellent question. Yeah, everything I've said so far is kind of, it requires there to be the sort of support within a school and staff who have the kind of interest and the passion to run these campaigns. So what we do really need is for additionally to that, these subjects to be in the curriculum. And only a couple of, about a month ago, the Department for Education published a new climate change strategy, which you can find online, which goes some way to talk about getting this more into the curriculum. So it is at present just in the curriculum, but really kind of tokenistically. So for example, myself, I teach biology. It is mentioned in the GCSE curriculum in a very kind of, I don't know, not in a particularly in-depth manner. And it's only very briefly mentioned in the entire A-level syllabus that we teach. So yeah, I also think it's really important that the climate crisis isn't just confined to science lessons and geography lessons, because this is a crisis in our communications. This is a crisis in our understanding of risk. This requires linguists. This requires mathematicians. This is not a science problem per se. This is an engineering problem. So there's so many organizations that are working to provide resources and campaign for this to be more embedded into the curriculum. And that is slowly changing. I don't think it's changing as fast as it needs to, though.
It's interesting what you said there about it being not just in the sciences, because there is a view by some people that you don't need a designated climate change teacher. That is the wrong way to do it. You need every teacher to take on the climate change agenda, and you need to work in teams. Now that's harder, isn't it? Because it takes more time and it takes more teacher time, and you need a really sympathetic head who will free up that teacher time. I mean, how does that problem confront you?
You've understood these challenges extremely well. I think this it's really interesting. I mean, nature is essential for all life. Nature is a part of all subjects. And when I talk about the climate crisis, what I really mean to say is the nature and ecological crises. So I think we really need to normalise in all subjects talking about this. It needs to be part of education in a really genuine way. But as you say, staff need training in this. The Department for Education strategy does go some way to suggesting that sort of some training is needed for some staff. But this is a crisis. We need to act like this is a crisis. This needs to be addressed in a really holistic way. And yeah, I believe that all staff need to have adequate and appropriate, so level appropriate training in kind of the basics of what the climate crisis is and how to talk to young people about it and what we can all do both in and out of our subjects. Because as you say, this isn't just about teaching it in the classroom. This is about a really holistic approach to working with our young people. And we shouldn't just say we're educating them. As you said at the very beginning, this is very much kind of two-way conversation. We're all in this together. So we need staff on board, we need parents on board, we need students on board, but then we need governors and alumni and the whole school community really on board as well.
And I mean, do you have a good case study of where it's worked well in the curriculum at all?
Oh, yes. I know some fantastic modern foreign languages teachers who are using some great resources, some articles and some podcasts, looking at the climate crisis in their lessons. I know some fantastic politics and economics teachers who have looked at theories such as tragedy of the commons in relation to the climate crisis. So yeah, it's definitely, it can be done in a really genuine, impactful way across the whole curriculum.
And what's interesting as well is that, and other people have said this, that when young people get involved in climate change, they get involved passionately, they want to know everything in detail, they want to be activists, and they then educate their parents. Do you find that happens as well?
Yes, definitely. It kind of goes back to what I was saying before about how we are all we all have a sphere of influence. I know that I've influenced my parents in some ways about sort of my choices to not fly, for example, in the same way that they have massively influenced me. But yeah, thinking about people who have younger people have relationships with their parents. There's actually been some research that was published very recently on weforum.org that shows that this kind of pester power, if we can get students thinking in a sustainable way, then that does kind of filter up to their parents. And this is so powerful, because if you think in a school that you've got a school of 1,000 students, so let's say on average there's sort of 1,000 families, obviously these numbers aren't going to be exact, and those families say an average of 2 parents. Those parents are going to work in organizations across the world. So the fact that we can influence students and instill these values in students, they can then go home and say, okay, how about we don't eat beef anymore? Let's have some sort of plant-powered meals. Then if that then influences those parents, then those parents might go on and influence their friends and their colleagues. So I think this is one of the reasons why I feel that schools are so well placed to be kind of epicenters of change in our communities. I think this potential for ripple effect is enormous, yeah.
Okay, well, we're getting very close to the end now, but tell us, I mean, how do you see your network growing, and how would you like it to grow in the future?
Great question. I mean, ideally, I would love to reach all schools in London. That is thousands of schools, so that is obviously a big challenge. But I do all of this voluntarily alongside teaching a full timetable as a biology teacher. Yeah, it's that would be my dream, but that I'm sure that would require a few more hours in the day. But I would love for all schools in London and throughout the UK and throughout the world to really act like this is a crisis, and to really step up in terms of, as we said before, quantifying their sort of carbon and environmental footprints, minimizing where they can, and just taking the action as soon as possible.
Do you at all try to link your schools up with, say, schools in the global south where they suffer really badly from climate change now, this moment?
We do try on a kind of ad hoc basis. We have where we have members within our networks who do have kind of quite informal links with other schools. We have had some cases where we've had students from around the world attend our meetings. It's very tricky logistically. That's definitely something that I'd love to do more of. Yeah.
Okay, so if anyone wanted to find out more about what you're doing, more about the Eco School Network, more about your work, how would they do that? Where would they go?
So you can find out about the London Schools Eco Network on the Transform Our World website, and there you can also find out about the other networks across the UK that are part of this umbrella network, the UK SSN. We're on Twitter as London Schools Eco, London as LSEN. And if anyone wants to get in touch, if you know of organisations that would be useful to partner with, or would be able to provide funding, or schools that might be involved, interested in getting involved, you can email london@ukssn.org.uk.
Okay, well, thank you. I mean, that was really, really interesting and a great interview. And you're obviously doing a lot of work. And as you say, you're doing it voluntarily on top of your own work. And so that's an amazing task. So, you know, I hope it's really successful, and I'm sure people will find it interesting. I know locally where I am, we're trying to work with schools, and we're trying to develop a competition with schools to actually address climate change. So I think what you said and the networks you've got to support will interest them. So thank you. Well, so thank you very much for doing this.
Thank you for your incredibly insightful questions. It's been a real pleasure speaking to you.
Okay, well, thank you. Anyhow, thank you again, and we'll finish this interview now.